podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, sisters. I'm Tom. Yes, still here. No baby yet, but it's getting awfully close. And yes, its gestation has lasted longer than the entire reign of Liam Ross and you at Chelsea. Sorry, that's our lame attempt to stop press. That's the best you're going to get. Here we are, kiss and go at half-time at the conclusion of double game week 33. And it's been a fairly fruitful one for Bench Boost. Thank you so much, Brighton defence. But there's greens all round, I think, from what I've seen anyway. But, you know, the loudest person shouts loudest. That's not quite right. But anyway, I need to wake up a bit. I thought it was the first half of Bournemouth versus Leeds, and that was really, really soporific. And hopefully this will get me going again. Joined as always by Sam. You all right, mate? How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Hopefully I can wake you up. And sadly, the Bournemouth Leeds game hasn't really kicked into life. Although I say sadly, there's a lot of clean sheets on the line. So maybe if it stays dull, it wouldn't be the worst thing. Either way, though, very well, thank you. Southampton have extended their unbeaten run, although I think our automatic hopes have slightly gone out the window with the draw last night. But aside from that, finally had a good FPL game week, so we can talk about that. And as always, we are Who Got the Assist on today's agenda. It's quite a packed one. We've got double game week 33, of course, to talk about. It's in progress. We've got the last couple of matches on in the background. And of course, we'll reflect on that at the end when the scores are in. But we'll have some reflections on how the game week's gone so far. And if there are any lessons to learn, what are they and what can we take moving forward? Joao Pedro, complete no-show. So, bench boosters in the mud, I'm afraid. We all lose. 14 players at most. Sad times. What is the point in press conferences, basically? We'll be talking about that. The bench boost chip as well, obviously a big week for it in game week 33. We've done quite well with it, but is it time to potentially retire it? Are there other chips that we'd be interested in looking at instead in future seasons? So we'll talk about that. Then, of course, we've got all of the usuals, including 1 week punts and captaincy. And by that point, we think the games will have wrapped up or be very close to wrapping up. So we'll have a look at how we've done in game week 33 and then any big bits of breaking news that might have happened in the second half. And then, of course, we're both on free hit in game week 34. So although we're not going to make this all about free hit, of course, because we're going to be talking about players that non-free hitters will also probably want to buy, we're going to show our drafts, do a bit of a reveal like we usually tend to try to do on this pod, and not having seen our drafts of each other's so far. So that'll be interesting. Lots of good options this week on a free hit as well. I think it could be an interesting section. We'll also talk about the fixtures in game week 34. Of course, it is Tuesday, the 22nd of April. Wednesday, the 22nd of April. Second halves of the remaining double game week fixtures are being played out behind us. Midweek off for many sides. And there is a Friday deadline, which until reading that, I'd actually forgotten. So I'm very glad I do this pod, because otherwise I could have very easily missed it. Anyway, Tom, how have we done so far?
Yes, let's delve into it. And let's start with you. For a man whose season you felt was becoming a bit of a chase. I mean, this has been a reversal of fortunes for the ages, hasn't it?
It's a good week. I forgot what these felt like, honestly. This is the first top 1 million rank of the season for a single game week. As I'm sure regular listeners will know, it's been a struggle. I've been close several times, I think 6 or 7 times just outside the top million. This week, very much past that. I think it's going to be a top 100k game week rank, or very, very close to. And I've halved my rank this week. So from 317k down to, going into tonight, it was 164k. It is now looking more like 150k at half time. Who knows how the second half will play out? Whatever happens, though, it's been a great week. I can't complain. Brighton have really come in clutch. Leeds in the first game of the week also really helped out. Even Bournemouth did well. Fernandez on my bench got a 6-pointer. Only disappointments, and it would be almost pathetic to call them disappointments considering how everything else has gone. But Joao Pedro as a no-show technically means Van Heck comes off my bench on the bench boost. So my bench boost hasn't, I think it scored 14 points overall after that substitution's made. Otherwise it'd be 27, 26 after Van Heck loses his bonus point, which I think will happen tonight. And of course, Gabriel getting 0 and should have probably been even less than that if he got the sending off. Now, again, I quite like letting the game run, and I think I'd like to live in a world where there are less red cards if possible, just let the game flow. But considering the standards at which we're being refereed in the Premier League at the moment, I'm surprised it wasn't a red. And that would have been a 3-game week red as well. So that could have been horrific. But yeah, I'm currently on 121 points at halftime. It is 96 going into tonight. I'm absolutely chuffed. I'm back on track. I could get a top 100k finish now. I've cut a 43-point deficit to 16 or 17 points. So yeah, good stuff. Happy.
Oh, yeah, that's very, very good. Transformative, really. Yeah, very similar for me. I think I'm on 114 at the moment. But yeah, spot difference. I've got Senesi, you've got Strike. That's Strauk, that's it. Strauk got Defcon in the first half, didn't he?
He did after 36 minutes. Crazy.
So I'm now just a couple of points outside of the top 50k, from just inside top 100k in one day, in 1 week. Hoping that's the top 100k set up for me, barring a proper brain fart. I think it's probably be about 20 points inside by the end of this. Top 100k, 5 weeks to go. Four points lost on the field each week. Possible, should be fine. So let's look upwards, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, is that the same reflections as you? A bit annoying about Joao Pedro. I don't really do that whole calculation thing about who comes off my bench, because I see it like every player is therefore valid, so it doesn't particularly matter.
Exactly.
Yeah, people can see it however they want to see it. I don't particularly care. I do think I think the only thing kind of to reflect on here a little bit is kind of the irony of last week that we, probably more I, was a little bit disappointed in the perceived lack of differentiation. I suppose it's obviously kind of how they get you a bit, because you're like, oh, I'm a bit annoyed about it, but then suddenly you do well, and suddenly all those things just kind of fall by the wayside, and you just feel like everything's all right with the world again. And maybe I did sort of downplay the net positive, that is the combination of differentials, the combo of your entire team doing something. I still think, and we'll come back to this when we talk about bench boost in a minute, that we might also return to game week 35 feeling a little bit like we'd like things to be slightly more different. Especially if you're returning it's just 1 or 2 free transfers when we get back to it. But yeah, I mean it's been good. It really has been good. But the key thing really is Brighton. As you mentioned, they came in clutch. That was it. I think that's the crux of the entire bench boost doing well. The double clean sheet against Chelsea. Maybe kind of you take the Joao Pedro 0 because of how effective the double clean sheet was.
Exactly.
Obviously, Mr. Gross showing up was very, very nice with the 2 assists across 2 games and the 5 bonus, I think it was, all in all. That's very, very decent indeed for 25% EO. That's the lowest EO that I've got on the board, which is all lovely. It all really is lovely. I mean, there were those people who had like Okafor, Justin. It felt like loads of people who had those players. I'm sure it was just kind of 2 or 3, but they were shouting very loudly. And there are some who have got very, very good scores. It was just an Andrew in the chat who's on 130. I mean, well done, Andrew. Wow. That's awesome. And it has felt like one of those weeks really where for some people it has gone really, really right. Some people it's gone really, really wrong. We do like to see it. We do like differentiations. We don't like to hear people doing badly, but it's good to see differentiation. But I do feel. I do kind of feel like, despite the fact it's gone well, I do stand by a lot of what I was saying last week a little bit. But yeah, no, it's for someone like you, Sam, who's had such a testing season. It's great to see you do well.
Yeah, it's just a relief. It's a nice reminder of what FPL can feel like if it does go your way for once. So I feel like I needed at least one of those before the season ended. It would have been horrific if I'd finished a whole season without one like standout good game week. But yeah, look, these things come and go. They're obviously fleeting, and you can never guarantee that you will ever get a rank a game week rank like this. So I'm just happy it's happened at least once. And we move forward. We're all on quite similar teams on wildcard 32, but it's that compound differential of like the whole 15 is unlikely to be the same as absolutely everyone else. And even just the chip strategy by itself, you're splitting the crowd because a lot of people went with a different route as well. And maybe that other route will fight back nicely in game week 35, 36, 37, etc. So it's far from over yet. Chip strategies are not won or lost on one good game week, but it's a nice feeling to get one in the bag and to get myself within like a hope of getting a top 100k finish. And we'll see how the end of tonight goes, whether I'm 15 to 20 points off 100k or more like 5 to 10 points off. That would be lovely. And that will really affect how I approach the last few game weeks and even the free hit as well, which we'll come on to later, as to how differential I want to be and how much I want to like attack the template in the last few game weeks. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff yet to come, I think.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, I mentioned Joao Pedro. I think it's kind of absolute classic FPL, isn't it? That he hasn't missed a game all year, and the 2 games he does miss are in the double game week. Liam Rossignol, formerly of this parish, now sacked, of course, open to work, knew he had a thigh injury, but didn't disclose it. And BBC later said that he likes to play his cards close to his chest. And the reason he didn't disclose it was for obvious reasons. And Palmer as well, who didn't show up against Brighton. Obviously, the ridiculousness of the news emerging via Mark Cucurella's barber, or ex-barber probably at this point, was just ridiculous, honestly. And it just kind of made me think a little bit that it's worth just quickly discussing via an FPL lens, of course. What is the point of press conferences now? It's just I don't know, Sam. I've watched quite a few in my time. I know that you've done exactly the same. And to me, it just feels like a bit of a charade of sort of platitudes, really. And how many ways can you vary on the theme of saying they're a tough team, but I think we've got a plan to beat them? that just feels all they are. And the press are trying to get managers to say something which basically generates a probably nowadays social media worthy news headline. And managers aren't obliged to answer questions truthfully or wholly. You know, they say we'll see, or there's an omission of details. And you know, we used to have this thing, and it's still ongoing, where the print media get another bit of a sit down after the main sort of broadcast media for a bit of a carve out, and then they get a kind of a few select quotes, and they come out at 10:30 on the Friday, normally, something like that. I've never seen anything of note from them for years. And I just wondered, kind of with the Joao Pedro thing and everything like that, and because we've got a bit of time while the games are still ongoing, I just wondered what your thoughts are really on that. Because, I mean, for years, Always Cheating, when they were still around, they were kind of propagating this idea of like, you know, in the US sports, they're obliged to disclose injuries. They're obliged to kind of to give availability en masse, net, you know, be truthful about it. And I know from an FPL lens, that's probably just me being really, really selfish. But stuff like this kind of happens, especially around bench boost time. And I think this is kind of how the two things link together, this and bench boost in a minute. It's just so frustrating. And it's made me think of the whole thing that we seem to get information from elsewhere, you know, social media, as we've seen this week, your beloved kind of pre-match photos and graphics. You know, we're there looking for shadowy figures on training photos, as we saw with
knew it was O'Reilly. I knew it was
O'Reilly. We're reading the TDs from rotation. I mean, it all just seems a bit like the information is coming from a place it shouldn't come from, to me, a little bit. And maybe that's just me being incredibly selfish as an FPL manager. What do you think about all this?
Well, I find it hard not to just entirely agree with you and just say, yeah, we can move on, because you're just correct. I mean, I think the press conferences and this need for constant information is a symptom of the world we live in now. We all have to be plugged into something 24/7. We've got instant access to absolutely everything. Like, you can talk to someone over in Australia live right this second if you want to, if you've got a friend out there. Like, we all need to be plugged in and connected at all times. And the media need to own that space. So to own that space, what do you need? Well, you need 24/7 news, you need updates, you need things that drive clicks and engagement and get attention. So the media do need these press conferences to try and get an angle and to get something new to say, because otherwise something like 24/7 Sky Sports News would cease to exist, and they need it to exist for money. So unfortunately, they're not going anywhere, but I completely agree that they're next to useless. There's no benefit that really comes out of them other than the odd slip of the tongue from a manager who might say something a bit silly and grab a headline, or maybe they want to make a point to a player or to a team or get in the head of someone. That's about it. And I don't think managers really see it as an opportunity anymore, just something to not slip up in. Like recently, over the last 5 to 10 years, we could probably list 10 to 15 managers in the Premier League that very clearly use press conferences as an opportunity to just outwardly lie and just make sure that the team that they're putting out is not one that the opponents are expecting. And unfortunately, because it's still technically information and we get actual interaction with a manager or whatever before a deadline, where it's impossible for us to not use that information. It's the same with team leaks, 5 minutes towards the deadline. If you see one, it's impossible to have not seen it. You can't unsee something. So unfortunately, we're just going to keep reacting to these little drops of news that come from these press conferences, but so rarely do they have any impact. And when you've got managers who will lie about team news and all of that, then it does mean that effectively we're all just shooting in the dark, especially with a bench boost, where you need all 15 players to play, at least in a regular game week. Well, you know that there might be 1 or 2 fibs out there, but okay, well, at least I've got a playing bench. And if someone is injured, then it's not the end of the world. With a bench boost, it is a bench boost kind of ruined if 1 or 2 players miss out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just annoying. I don't think there's anything we can do about it either. I like the American model that you talked about. The problem is, though, it works because they only ever play each other in the American NFL league, or I think it's NFL, you said, in that league. Whereas in football, over in the UK, well, okay, great. They'll have to be honest in a press conference or disclose the injury news on a Friday before the Saturday game. But then what happens when they're playing in the Champions League on the Tuesday? Can they be all coy again? Can they lie ahead of that one? Or is there an obligation to also tell the truth globally across all leagues? And I think it'll be very hard to get all teams across all leagues to agree on that. So I think we're kind of stuck, unfortunately, because we're all interconnected, playing against different teams from different leagues, different countries who might see things differently. So, yeah, I think we're screwed. Not going to get anything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too far down this route, but I feel like the modern manifestation of the press conference is very similar to the environment you were describing, about kind of rolling news and endless sort of talking heads discussing the same thing, just in a slightly different phrasing. Like, I've got to fill time, and it definitely feels like it's a constant sort of battle between the managers to give absolutely nothing away and the press to try to eke out even the smallest, as you said, slip of the tongue or the smallest bit of phrasing. And we all do it, don't we? You know, is a player fit? You know, we're all there kind of, and the manager gives sort of a slightly less than 100% confirmed yes. Then we're there looking at it thinking, is that, does he mean that the player's slightly doubtful? Does that mean that he's fine to be on the bench? Does that mean he's fine to be to start? And I don't know, the whole thing just feels like it just links into this whole sort of industry which relies on hot air being peddled again and again. I mean, there's nothing more not mind-numbing than, I had it in the hairdressers the other week, where like Sky Sports News on the
not
background.
the same barbers.
No,
yeah.
Me and Mark just gave it a high five. No,
you have the news.
I did. I'm part of the cartel, the hairdressing cartel. But no, I was in the barbers the other day, and it was just like Sky Sports News, man. It's just awful. I'm sorry, but it's
poor. It's really poor.
So much of it is just filling space, and maybe the press conference has sort of become that a part of that whole ecosystem. Yeah, but I mean, part of the annoyance here is obviously the bench boost and how we've had a player like Joao Pedro who's played in every game, suddenly nowhere, and that's just the manager's volition to not say anything. They're not compelled to say anything. Admit it's not a lie; it's a lie of omission, and that is why Rosinho has been rightly sacked, in my view.
No other reason.
No other reason whatsoever.
No.
Egg Bally just had Joao Pedro captain and Palmer vice captain, and that's the thing. But yeah, I mean, a bench boost to kind of really focus it in on FPL. Is it time to say goodbye, do you think, Sam, to our the most annoying, I think, FPL chip that we've got at the moment? As mentioned last week, I think the player experience sort of informs this a bit. Like, first half of the season, a bit more of a free-for-all when you play it. I played in game week 1. And it was just like, right, we're just gonna get rid of it because it's just a millstone around your neck. But is it like the root cause of that poor player experience in the end game we spoke about last week? Like, the more I thought about it, and I think we did touch on it, the more I think, yes, it almost definitely is part of that.
I think you make a really good point, because when you think about the chip strategies that everyone gets like locked into in the second half of the season, and it is even worse this year because all of us got the chips reloaded for the second half. So we all had the exact same distribution of chips left to use in the second half. When there are doubles, there are blanks, it does kind of force you down a particular route, like, or pathway, or one of maybe 2 or 3. Obviously, there are other weeks that the bench boost chips are being used this season, but I think we're almost always looking at double game weeks for them. Sometimes there are single game weeks that works and you can use other chips to cover other weeks, but it does really narrow the playing field. And when you've got 50% of the player base going down a certain chip strategy with a bench boost in 1 week, they are likely to have a very similar looking team, especially with smaller double game weeks as we now have due to the FA Cup scheduling slightly changing in recent seasons. It does narrow the player base a little bit more. So yeah, I find it hard to disagree with you that bench boost, although I don't necessarily hate the chip per se. I think it's quite a good idea for a chip. I think the cause it has, the effect, it has on the rest of the experience across other game weeks and the preparation for it, and then also being all on a very similar team after it, does make FPL a little bit boring in the second half of the season. Now, to offer a small solution without getting rid of the bench boost overall, I really like what you said the other week about, well, let's have a selection of chips that you can pick from, but you're not allowed to pick them all. So bench boost is still part of that, maybe 1 of 2 or 3 in that bucket, where you could go all out attack or double points in defense or so like that, or park the bus, that kind of vibe, where, okay, you could pick bench boost, or you could pick all out attack, or you could pick that, and it would open up a few different strategies across the season, rather than just, well, we all have to use the bench boost, so we're all going to be forced down quite a similar pathway.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea, and I've been banging on about it for years, but I don't think it's ever going to happen, Sam.
I don't think so, but I do like it.
Too complex for the FPL manager, the lowest common denominator to do. I think it'd be deemed too confusing by FPL. But I mean, I think you're right about just generally them needing to change things, and I think that's probably the key. Oh, so that's the assist for Krupi. That's always nice. And I think that I do think maybe just because of what we were saying last week about the end game experience, I think that should sound the death knell for the bench boost. Because even though last week it struck me as kind of, when I was listening back to edit, what I was saying was that, maybe they need more time to think about it with the FA Cup and things like that. What I kind of neglected to think about was the fact that bench boost has been there for so long. We've had double chips for this just season alone, but the bench boost has been there for so bloody long that surely they know by now exactly how that impacts manager behavior and kind of the experience of playing this game.
Yeah.
And I think that probably means that they should probably have enough information by now to understand that it kind of, it maximizes double game weeks. Absolutely fine, absolutely cool. I get that, but it doesn't feel like the right instrument or the most exciting way to be doing it, because of the kind of the knock-on impacts that it has of having to use it. And of course, always had to use it in a regimented way. You can do whatever the hell you want. But if you are an engaged manager, you almost definitely are going to be playing it in the way that, most of us have played it through time, which is to wild cards of the week before to set up, get that bench boost on, and there you are with a very similar team to a lot of other people. And as information has kind of has kind of rolled and rolled and rolled, magnified, got saturated. Suddenly you're in a situation like with last week where a lot of people basically have exactly the same team.
Yeah, that is pretty much it. Unfortunately, like you said, we get kind of pushed down a rabbit hole, and I would like to see them change it. I think the odds of them actually doing so are quite low. Because I think general sentiment around bench boost is, points are good, so we want more of them, and it does create that excitement around a double game week. But I think I'm not adamant that they get rid of it, but I would be all for it. I'd be very happy, very comfortable if they did decide to go another way. I would like to see them replace it with something, if they did get rid of it. But yeah, I'd be pretty reasonably happy to see the end of it.
I think there's lots of really fun ways they can play with it. Honestly, there's so many other possibilities. I mentioned last week, attack forwards get double score, all three forwards score double, or whatever forwards you play score double. Part the bus, all defenders score double. Like, imagine the ways in which you could manipulate that if you knew that you were going to play part the bus on a double game week. You know, you had 5 defenders that you were trying to fit into your team to optimize that, and kind of the decisions you got to make versus other people looking to optimize attack. So next year, imagine that Isaac, one of the Arsenal forwards, whoever they may be, and Haaland are all goers, trying to fit all 3 of those in a team to maximize your points potential in that particular week. Like, it's absolutely mad. And I think they would have similar sort of it would have similar implications, I guess, as bench boost. Nobby said in the chat it requires a lot of shenanigans to get it to work. Because you'd need to do that if with like a positional chip. But still, I don't know. I just feel like it should join all that attack in the bin, and they should do something maybe a little bit different. Maybe it is, a case of being careful what you wish for. And this time next year, they'd have introduced something ridiculous, and we'll be sat here being like, "God, bench boost was much easier than this." We've got to take, here I am planning in a -8 this week, and the next week we're going to have to take a -4 to get back to normal. And yeah. I mean, I suppose that's where I am, Sam. It's kind of like, I do think it probably needs to go, but it's a case of being careful what you wish for, almost. It's the devil, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with ideas on the spot, but I do like the part of the bus. I do like the opportunity of options to pick from. I'd like to see them do something a little bit different without necessarily changing the structure of the game like they did with assistant manager. I think they had the right idea to try something a bit new, but not knowing what the chip was at the start of the season, that didn't help. And then I think bringing in managers and it just made it overly complicated. Even us, we were scrambling a little bit to try and figure out what the best way of playing with it was, and explaining it to people who weren't as engaged was a nightmare. So I think the simplicity is something that they need to try and hold on to, or at least simplicity in the way the chips are structured. Like, it's easy to explain to a 10-year-old effectively. That would be great, but I wouldn't mind bench boost going. I really wouldn't. I could see that being a pretty positive thing for the game.
Yeah. There's so many things they could do. It's mentioned a few times in the chat already about kind of manual subs, but I think that's a whole different conversation almost. I believe in I don't think either of us play, but in UCL fantasy you can between days change your players over. I think that is a completely different. I wouldn't ever have that as like a single week chip. I'd be quite tempted to just include that in general in FPL. But I suppose the point of it is the simplicity of you set your team and then there's nothing you can do. I think changing that may fundamentally alter the FPL experience a little bit. So I can see them being really, really cautious about that. But yeah, I totally get why people might be advocating something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's time to say goodbye. Whether they're actually bold enough to do it. I mean, Arsman did show that they are bold enough to do some stuff. Whether they're bold enough to do it, though, that's the key. And as you said, Sam, it's about, I suppose, that simplicity, or at least that sort of ease of comprehension of what the new chip is going to be.
Mm.
I remember
Yeah,
when free hit was introduced, it was like really confusing for a lot of people. They didn't quite understand. I think it was because of the naming of the chip. People didn't really quite get it, did they?
Yeah, I don't actually remember when the free hit chip was released and whether or not it felt confusing at the time. But I
It
know
was
a number of people have.
2018, I think. It was the
Yeah,
second season we were in.
yeah. I mean, it feels like a long time ago now, and it feels like it's always been there. But yeah, it used to be an even more simplistic game, and I suppose we all learned how to deal with things like the free hit. So new chips shouldn't really scare us. I'd like to see them change things and let us know at the start of the season what those chips are going to be. And I think the crucial thing that they're going to want to do, because it benefits them, is make sure it is simple enough for new players or players who aren't as engaged as us and listening to weekly podcasts on it, for them to understand what's going on. Because I think that's the only way to grow the player base, which is clearly what they want to do. Whether or not we want to compete with 12 million other managers is by the by. It's much more down to whether FPL wants hundreds and thousands and millions more players.
Yeah. I mean, how many players are left now? That's the thing. I suppose it's more than net than it used to be. So, yeah, there we go. Leeds just equalised, but I think it's like really Hill own goal, fantastic. That's he just can't stop scoring own goals. That guy, can he?
I know. Just when I thought I was having a good game week, eh?
Yeah, never lucky.
No.
Yeah, okay. Let's go on then to 1 week punts for the week ahead before we get on to the meatier stuff towards the end. Last week or this week just gone, I had Cherky with my Joker, so that's 20 plus whatever he's got today. I don't know if he's been subbed yet. I know has Semenyo just been subbed? I saw for a couple of minutes.
Semenyo's gone off. Yeah. And Nuri.
Okay. So yeah, whatever Cherky gets today, probably give me just 24 or whatever, which is more than fine. So up to over 200 now, 205. And you went for DCL.
Yeah. Well, unless he's picked up an assist off of that own goal or something, then he's still on, I think, 8 points now, I would imagine. So yeah, not much from him, but yeah, I wanted to have a bit of fun, and I couldn't bring myself to just copy you and go with the same player. That's not the point of this game. So I thought I'd have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, fair enough. And for the week ahead,
it's Bruno. It's time. I think he's a player I've been holding back, hoping for double game week or just a really good fixture, but we're running out of weeks. I've kind of had a look ahead at like the ideal weeks that I'd want to maybe use the big players, and Bruno is ideal in maybe one other week, but that other week I think there's someone better that I want to use. So yeah, I'm going to get rid of him now, and hopefully he doesn't decide that this is the home fixture that he dries up on the points.
And for me, it's Gibbs White. Just check through, just see if I'd used him, because I feel like kind of ultimate fair for this, and I haven't. So yeah, Gibbs White for me this week on form. I feel like this is they've got to, the last 5 aren't great, really. Actually, for Forest, and they've obviously got the European considerations to think about. Sunderland's, and we'll speak about this game a bit more in just a second, actually. Potentially kind of done for the year. I don't know how much we're going to read into that. That's my early starter for 10. It does feel like kind of Gibbs White's got the form at the moment, as we'll discuss again in a minute. So yeah, he's very much my pick for this week while he's hot. And in captaincy, you kind of touched on it. I suppose Bruno's going to be kind of the main captain for a lot of people who are looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, he'll definitely be the highest effective ownership by quite a distance, I would think. And rightfully so. He's got a great record at home, not a bad fixture. It's not the best one in the world, so you can take it on. But Bruno's in scintillating form, so it's quite hard to overlook him if you're playing with a straight bats. If you are with a little bit of ground to make up in a mini league, or you want to like hit a rank target and you're chasing quite heavily. For example, if I was still 30-40 points outside the top 100k going into this week, I'd probably be looking elsewhere. And on a free hit, I probably wouldn't even include him, just to hope for some positive variance and maximize the potential for differentiation. And then other players do come into it. I don't think it's one where it's like, oh, you must captain Bruno or you're absolutely screwed. there are other decent fixtures out there and players in a decent run of form that you could look at and just hope that Bruno has an off day. So yeah, you've got Liverpool at home to Palace, who don't look like they're concentrating on the league whatsoever. So Salah's going to be popular for anyone on a free hit. Other Liverpool options are available. Bowen as well at home to Everton. And then you can look at maybe even other Man United options, or possibly even an Arsenal defender if you back them to keep a clean sheet. So I think you can look elsewhere, but the simple, like if you wanted a one-word answer, it's Bruno. But I think it's a week where you could go against it if you fancied it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had multiple sort of twos and fro's on this with several people who's at work and also kind of friends, like, and about where the opportunities are if your season isn't where you want it to be, to try something different. Obviously, we spoke about Palmer last week, captaining him, and obviously those who did go there, my commiserations hugely. But you did the right thing, probably, by going against Haaland, arguably. Game week where it did involve Burnley, we spoke about that, and blah, blah, blah. But this week, I think is quite a good one to potentially go against. I mean, Alex Trembath and Tom Med on Flash Correspondence both kind of seem to agree that Brentford probably will have the better of that game, and I'm kind of with them on that. I think Brentford's going to win next Monday. So, despite Bruno being hot, best asset in the game, I would not kind of really have any problem with anybody thinking, oh, I'm going to try something different this week, and going elsewhere. I think that's absolutely fine. Where you go does become a bit more of an open question, I suppose. Part of me kind of thinks that I'd back the X motivation and back Bowen potentially if you were looking for like the next best option. Salah, I was surprised where his data is actually, Sam, in terms of being kind of 13th overall for non-pen XGI according to Understat. But I was surprised that was as good as it was.
Yeah.
Maybe just default to the old favourite if you're on free hit. But if you're not on free hit, Bowen's a lot more gettable, and potentially one that you would captain if you want to. Maybe my first choice for kind of the captain if you're trying to do something a bit different. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing to say for a striker, but he does have the routes to points because he has been picking up DEFCON every now and then as well. And is he on pens now as well? Now Paquetá's gone. So, yeah, I don't mind it. I think he's on pens. I can't remember anyone else taking one. I think he might have taken one. So yeah, I don't mind it. Everton are a decent defense though, and we'll come on to it later when we get to the free hit stuff. But I think everyone's just like, yeah, West Ham are going to beat Everton, even though West Ham are far below them in the table, and Everton are fighting for Europe. So I don't know about that. I don't think it's like as obvious a win as some people are thinking. Yeah, I don't mind him. As I'll almost certainly have him in my I was about to say my team, but like in my thinking for free hit at least. But I don't think he's quite as high up on my list as with other people.
Yep, don't mind it at all. Yeah, Bruno all the way for people like me looking to paint the town beige. Just reverse park very nicely into that top 100k. We were going to pause for results right now, but I don't think we're quite there, are we? We've still got another 15 minutes, so maybe let's move on to previewing the blank game week. I think we'll leave our free hit drafts to the very end. That we're not going to kind of do form versus fixture or anything. Most of it goes into this, but on screen on YouTube, and we'll talk through it obviously all, are the fixtures. No Sunday game, Sam. It's gonna be a very boring Sunday. I was disconcerted to see that there's no game on Sunday. But yeah, hit all the fixtures. So Man City, Burnley, Bournemouth, Leeds, Brighton, and Chelsea all blank. There's some FA Cup, which is all presumably why there's no Sunday. The roster is on screen. As with last week, kind of we're going in terms of the doubles, I think what we're going to talk about is kind of what stands out per game, and kind of what players you might want to be considering. I think a lot of it is worth saying is vibey for free hitters. For non-free hitters, it's more about looking at those longer term angles, and longer term, there's no long term anymore. You've got what was it, 5 weeks left. But players you're looking to kind of spend those precious transfers on to get you to the end. There are going to be a very small amount of people who are on wildcard as well, of course. So I think that one thing that does kind of, as a kind of overarching point, Sam, stand out to me about the games that we've got is that there's no kind of gimme. There's no sort of game that we're all saying, right, lump in on that. I'm going to triple up there. That's easy. That is all done. And that, I think, has a lot of impacts, primarily that there are a lot of assets, therefore, on the table. What's your view on these fixtures in front of us?
I think it's exactly that. I think it's a very exciting week to be free hitting because there are truly no massive standout options. I think when you're picking a free hit draft, if you are free hitting, there are two options that kind of pick themselves in my mind, and that's Bruno and Gabriel. After that, there are good options, but there's a very wide pool of players all within like a range that I would consider pretty decent. And I think a lot of it comes down to how you read each particular fixture. Like Fulham, Aston Villa, there's nothing separating them in the odds in terms of goals or clean sheet odds. Same goes for, I think it's West Ham and Everton as well, are almost identical. Sunderland, Nottingham Forest also almost identical. And a lot of people are just like automatically going for the home team. That makes sense. That's one way of playing it. But if you're chasing a little bit, can Nottingham Forest get something away at Sunderland, who have been a bit leaky recently? Absolutely. Same goes for Everton away at West Ham. I mentioned earlier, like Everton are in the position they're in for a reason, and they've got some good options there. Even Crystal Palace away at Liverpool. Sarr has a great record against Liverpool and could easily catch him on the break if he plays. I don't think there's any bankers here. Like even the highest odds of clean sheets, like Arsenal and Liverpool this week, Newcastle and Crystal Palace could easily score in those. So I think it provides a lot of opportunity if you're chasing. It's quite a risky free hit for people who want to keep it simple because you can pick the most popular players. That's absolutely fine. But there are no, like you said, bankers in there, and things could just go completely against anyone this week. It's a really interesting one. Loads of midfielders. Like I can name like 10 to 12 midfielders I'd be very tempted to include. Defenders, not quite as many, but there's a decent few teams I'd quite fancy. And then 4 or 5 strikers as well, which is more than what I've been interested in most weeks. Even goalkeepers, I think you could easily look past Raya if you wanted to and look at 4 or 5 others if you really fancied it. I think there's loads of variety that it really truly depends how you read in each individual fixture. So I would advise everyone free hitting to try and work out how you see each match going and work backwards from there rather than, who are the best FPL picks and almost imagining scenarios in which they score the points this week.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that a lot of it actually does come down to if you're free hitting, maybe we've spoken about kind of what James Planet calls the all-in strategy. Maybe there is kind of making sure, I don't know, there's always an element of I'm interested in this particular defender, therefore I am not looking at the attackers from the other team. That's something to always sort of re-examine every now and again. You know, am I therefore missing out on the opportunity to look at this particular player? Could they be an absolute gem? You know, I've got Mavropanos in, therefore am I ignoring and Dewsbury Hall? That's the sort of thing that I think I'm thinking about a little bit more this week because there are no gimmies. But I think it's a really interesting week and there's a lot of variety. Let's what we can do, let's take each game by game. We'll hold that thought. We'll go back to double game week 33 when at full time, then we'll do our free hits. I think that kind of works as quite a nice sort of segue between everything, just to cover it off. So Friday night, we've got Sunderland versus Forest, and here I've listed a few individuals, or we've listed a few individuals. We've got Roofs in goal. If you can see past Raya, the thing I can't see past Raya is that awful haircut, Sam, that awful hairstyle. I mean,
he should go to Kukureya's barbers.
Since he's got that, maybe he does. That's the thing. Since he's got that, things have gone have gone south very quickly for Arsenal. That guy needs to get that hair back to normality. That's what I'm saying. The 90s boy band that does not work with the piggy nose. But anyway, if you do want to look past Raya, Rovs is there. Obviously, old favourite Mukiele. Maybe ELF, Elf as a bit of a maybe the bench pick. I think 4.8, probably the cheapest, most viable bench pick potentially. There's Lewis Miley, obviously at Newcastle. If you're like, oh, just whatever, and maybe Brobby as well up front if you want some sort of cheaper striker on the Sunderland side. On the Forest side, I think it really is kind of Gibbs White and then Williams. If you're making a transfer for the long term, I'm not sure I'd be investing in either of these teams. For free hit, I'm only really interested in Morgan Gibbs White, who, yes, okay, there's the hat trick, but I mean, he's done really well in the away games. I gave the case a few weeks ago when I did buy him for that -4 away at Spurs. But he seems to do very well in away games, and obviously the hat trick has really counted. But yeah, I mean, he's just a bit of a lock for me on free hit. Of those, or any extras for you from that game on the Friday night? It's a tough one to call, isn't it? I mean, that could be. I think I've got a predictions league that I'm in with a friend of mine, Joe, who run by a friend of mine, and I think I've got that game as like 2-1 Forest, but that's like a really sort of finger in the air sort of thing rather than something reasoned.
Yeah, it's a vibes fixture. You have to figure out, like I said, with a number of these, how you feel it's going to go. It could very easily go either way. Sunderland's defensive data has dropped off quite significantly. But on the flip side, they're at home. They've got a good record at home. They don't concede many historically at home. So again, it's which narrative do you want to believe there? I would add Ballard to the thinking here because he's back now and gets good DEFCON rate, great XGI or XG rather for a defender. In fact, I think it's the best out of all defenders in the league recently. So he would be in my thinking if you did back the Sunderland defense. But this is like you were talking about earlier. You need to almost pick your poison in fixtures like this, or just avoid it altogether. But you don't want to have a Rofs or a Mukiele or a Ballard going up against a Gibbs White, because then that completely cuts your upside on a free hit. Week to week, not such a problem. You're always going to get a bit of competition and a few players up against each other, so you're okay with hedging. In a free hit, you've got to, I think, more often than not, choose a side and try to work out, okay, are Nottingham Forest going to score a couple? If so, you'll maybe land on the Gibbs White side, which I really like. Or if you think Sunderland are going to keep it tight, you're taking on Gibbs White and you're going with maybe double Sunderland defense and hoping that you've called that one correctly, because not everyone is going to have that much coverage of Sunderland defense. So yeah, it's one of those fixtures that I'd really pay close attention to. If you land on the right side of it, it could be quids in.
Yep. I think that's absolutely right. I don't think there's going to be that much in there on that one. But I mean, we shall see. I suppose the only thing with that is that the defensive data for the offensive data for Sunderland since turn of the year has fallen off a cliff. They're now third bottom for XG. So maybe that kind of might make you think of Forest. Like I think Williams is like my first kind of defensive sub, so maybe that's something to bear in mind. Fulham Villa, Sam, I've got Anderson and Wilson in as the Fulham picks, and obviously Rodgers and Watkins as the Villa picks.
I think that's pretty much it. I've seen one draft with a Martinez in there somewhere, but I thought that was quite rogue. Yeah, I think it is those four. I can't really see past it. Villa and Fulham. Defensively, can I see a clean sheet? Not massively, but Anderson I understand to an extent because he is very good on DEFCON. But yeah, that's the only defensive coverage I'd be looking at in this one. Aside from that, Wilson's been great all season, has been overperforming, but I can understand why people would include him on a free hit. So yeah, no hesitation about recommending him. And then Villa, Watkins has been in good form recently and obviously fighting for that England squad place. Rodgers has also been much better recently as well. So I'm tempted to include a Villa player on my free hit. They just don't come that cheap. And I don't know if I'd have Watkins above 2 or 3 others. That's my only concern, especially with Tammy Abraham as well, waiting to get minutes too. But yeah, at least 3 of them I would recommend: Wilson, Watkins, and Rodgers, all to be in the mix. Anderson maybe a few notches down in the defenders for me, but he's certainly not a bad pick by any means. He'll be popular for non-free hit, that's for sure. So if they do keep a clean sheet, and I don't think the free hitters will be loving that one too much.
Fair. I mean, the only thing I'm going to throw into the mix here is that since turn of the year again, Fulham are actually the 3rd worst defence after clocking in decent numbers beforehand. I think that kind of enhances the case for Rodgers back in form, and obviously Watkins, who seems to have gotten his arse in gear recently. I mean, for Villa, talking into that Tammy point, Champions League is kind of almost definitely sealed, but I wonder whether they want to kind of get it cemented with this game. I've got Watkins my free hit. I think that's kind of one I go for. It's whether I kind of double up with Rodgers. We'll speak about that in a little bit. I've been really set on just having Watkins in the free hit. I think that's. I'm pretty happy with it. We'll talk about it in a minute. I'm not sure on Fulham. They feel a little bit like Sunderland and another whose season has kind of fizzled out a little bit. I mean, I do think, as you mentioned, Wilson's probably the one that I'd be considering the most. I don't know. I just don't feel particularly keen on it. His data actually hasn't been too bad at all. It's just I don't know. I just feel like he gets crowded out by other options. Not that Villa are particularly kind of tight defensively, as we know. They've always got a goal in them to be conceded, haven't they? So yeah. But for me, it's just not something that has crossed my mind, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not that interested. What Aston Villa, absolutely, from an attacking point of view, I can get on board with. But they're very much in the mix with others. I don't think they stand out ahead of others necessarily for me. So they could work their way into a draft for me. I could be convinced on either Watkins or Rodgers. Wilson is on the outskirts of my thinking, but I feel like he's a player that I would maybe want to try and take on this week because his ownership's relatively decent for non-free hitters. So it feels like another pick that I might want to try and go against to gain that edge. But yeah, he could easily punish because he has been in great form all season.
Right. Okay then. On to Liverpool Palace. Yeah, a case of probably one player on one team and then who knows on the other. For Liverpool, Van Dijk, Salah, probably the 2 nailed. And if you want to go for a third, who's the third? Szoboszlai, Gakpo, Woodman in goal at 3.9. Sam, very exciting. Forcing an Isaac. And then at Palace, Sarr has got a very good record against Liverpool. He's got 9 returns in 9 games against Liverpool in his career. He scored against them second most of all Premier League sides. Villa are actually the team that he dislikes the most. But, yeah, a very, very good record against Liverpool. Offensively and defensively sound, Liverpool. I think they've taken advantage of their competitors, especially Chelsea, falling off a bit, but producing all right data. And Salah, as mentioned earlier on, is actually doing okay in the underlying data, and Virgil feels a shoe-in. I'm not sure on the third Liverpool. A Fantasy Football Scout in the Goals Imminent article from Fantasy Football FFS Joe highlighted that Gakpo has taken a lot of shots this year. And over the last few weeks, he's taken lots and lots of shots. Quality of those shots has been poor, but he's taken them. It's a volume game, reminiscent of old school Salah. Got loads of minutes. Szoboszlai, we know in quantity, set pieces, if he's right back, DEFCON, etc. Potentially a bit boring, but I can kind of understand why people are going there. Woodman in goal, as I mentioned earlier on. I mean, sure, if you're trying to force something in, I probably wouldn't be going with him as my starting keeper, but whatever. And speaking of forcing, Isaac, I can see why people might want to go there, Sam. You go into that sort of eyes wide open, knowing that you're paying a premium effectively for an unfit player, and you're purely differentiating off that. On a 1 week basis, that could pay off. Probably won't, but it could. So yeah, I mean, that game, I think a lot of people are looking at it as a bit of a gimme. I'm not sure I quite buy that. As Liverpool are going to kind of steamroll them, but I think it's a game where there'll be a lot of representation this week.
Yeah, I can see triple Liverpool being pretty popular on a free hit. I think it's actually one of the fixtures that you could go against and go for the opposite. Like you say, Sar's got a great record. If you back Palace to score, then Sar's a likely candidate. And I think the logic you'd have to follow. I mean, you mentioned Van Dijk as a lock. I don't have him as a lock. I think he's a good option. But if you think Palace have a decent chance of scoring, I think you go against him. I think he'll have high ownership. And if unless he scores another goal, then I think you would have to go against him if you back Palace to score in this one. So if Sar's in a free hit, then I would not have Van Dijk in it. And that is something I'm definitely considering. Salah's in partly for sentimentality, but also because he's actually been in pretty decent form recently. Although, yeah, Szoboszlai looked like he might have taken the last penalty with Salah on the pitch against PSG. So that's a factor to consider. I haven't seen anything near enough from Isak to want to take the risk on a player like him at the moment. But Gakpo is very much of interest to me. It is a volume game with him, and on a free hit, 1 week only. If he's taken 4 or 5 shots, then who knows? Fingers crossed. So yeah, I think this will be a very interesting match to try and call this week. This is the one where I think it could either like burst into flames or set alight a free hit, because this will involve a lot of picks that non-free hitters won't have, aside from Van Dijk.
Yeah, it's tricky, but I can't. At the moment, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure on whether I will go with Liverpool. West Ham, Everton. I think there's a lot in this. I think Bowen for non-free hitters should be a consideration in general. But Bowen will be in every free hit team. Maybe on defenders as well. There's a lot of cheapness going on. Mavropanos at West Ham, who again looked very lively on Monday night. Had a couple of attempts, good for DEFCON, is due for 4.1. Hermanson in goal at 4.2. Everton side, 4.5 million. Michael Keane, he of goal scoring and DEFCON fame, is back in the mix now. And in midfield, as we mentioned earlier on, and Dye 6.2, the pen taker, and Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, he's got an R in there, and Jimmy Garner as the cheapies. I don't know. I really like the cut of Mavro's jib. DEFCON's goal threat, another couple of attempts on Monday, like I mentioned. And West Ham, Sam, since turn of the year, which also covers Diouf and Hermanson, they've actually got the second best defence at home in terms of XGA. They're only 0.3 off Arsenal's, which is pretty wild. And I really like Mavropanos as an enabler this week, honestly. He's been basically in the majority of my my free hits as kind of the third defender. Somerville is a fun vibes pick, back from injury, 5.5. If you like it, why not? And Tati Castellanos up front, again, vibes pick. If you like it, why not? Everton, meanwhile, solidly kind of mid-table for everything on the roster. Don't mind if any of those midfielders you fancy them. On their day, they're fine. And Dye is on those pens. Hasn't been explosive this year. I think he's only got 1 double-digit haul, if that. Garner feels like kind of solid bench one territory, and KDH is the explosive one, perhaps counterintuitively the cheapest price. But since I fancy Mavropanos, as I mentioned earlier on, I'm kind of leaving the Everton midfield. Is kind of where I'm at with that. I feel that feels logical, even though I do acknowledge the fact that particularly KDH is a really interesting sort of cut price option.
Yeah, again, a bit like the Sunderland Nottingham Forest game at the start of this section, I could easily see this going either way. If you read it correctly, there are big points on offer because there'll be a lot of differentials here. Mavropanos, if you think they keep a clean sheet, I think you pick him because he's got great goal threat as well, decent on the DEFCON, really, really good cheap option. Bowen, I think, will be a lock on at least 80% of the teams as well. I don't think it's necessarily a given that you need to pick him because there are other good strikers, but he will be popular. So it might be a bit of a coverage pick. Somerville is exciting because he has had those little streaks in him. Obviously got injured as well. So he's gone off of the radar for a lot of people, but he's a streaky player. He could pop up with a goal or two. But again, I do keep reiterating it, and I promise you I've got no Everton bias whatsoever here. But they could easily turn West Ham over. They've been a better side all season long, and they're fighting for Europe. So I'm struggling to read which way this is going to go, and I don't have it as a lock that West Ham are the the side of this fixture that I necessarily want to back at the moment. And I think actually, if you're chasing a little bit, it's not the worst idea in the world to just say, well, you know what, I fancy Everton, because there are 3 or 4 differentials in there that could easily do very well. But yeah, that being said, Bowen and Mavropanos will be my 2 favourites. I think Bowen's currently in my draft. Mavropanos has been in and out of my drafts for quite a while now. He's certainly in the mix if I read it going West Ham's way. But yeah, this is another one of those fixtures where honestly, I think you've got to put it down to personal belief systems on whether or not Everton are going to roll over or going to turn up and take West Ham down, because there are a lot of good options on both sides here.
Oh, last minute Leeds equaliser, which is FPL relevant. I think that might actually be one of the most interesting games of the weekend, honestly. Depending on which way you back. Maybe there's kind of, I think there's definitely kind of, it's again, we're kind of beginning to touch the next motivation, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more. Somebody can talk about a bit more next week if I'm not around. But I think that's kind of where it starts to kind of hit. West Ham completely changed, aren't they? And I think that's kind of what I'm banking on. But yeah, obviously the impact of last weekend's kind of painful Merseyside derby may have an impact on Everton as well. We don't know. On the trickier games of the week next, Wolves and Spurs. If you're not on free hit, I think that you just ignore this game altogether. And on free hit, I think there's definitely a case to ignore it altogether as well. I mean, do you back anything in this at all? I mean, surely no Wolves. Maybe Mane on the bench. Spurs-wise, I mean, Porro's popular at 5.1 after his goal. Xavi, some idiots, such as this one, currently have them sat in the draft. Kinski at 3.9 is a backup goalkeeper. There's kind of Van de Ven, Danso as cheap picks. I don't mind Porro at all. Some set piece share, playing inverted as well, which some might say is going to lead to some greater points potential. I actually quite like Xavi, actually. I mean, purely due to talisman theory, actually. He's like indisputably the man there at Spurs. Pure vibes, of course. But I don't mind that at all as kind of that pump pick. We'll come on to it in a little bit, like why I don't mind that. But I'm not sure I can bring myself to back them defensively. And I think that if there's a compelling case to be made for another midfielder, I'm not wedded to it in any way, shape or form. I know that a lot of like the clean sheet odds are back in Spurs. I know that there's a lot of positivity on free hit surrounding Spurs because of the Wolves being there. And if you are using solvers, you're probably going to be looking at having Porro and maybe another defender. I think I saw in one draft earlier on today.
Really?
I'm not sure I can get behind that at all. One analytics proximal person's draft that I saw on the interwebs. I
didn't think Spurs would be appearing in solvers, to be honest. But okay.
I mean, it depends how you're doing all these things, Sam. I'm not looking at them anymore as discussed, which we're not going to discuss here. But anyway, how do you see this one?
I think this is the opportunity. I really do. No one's going to have Spurs aside from free hitters. So obviously it could all crash and burn because Spurs have been absolutely awful all season long. So I understand why you would avoid them. I don't know. I can't even remember how many Spurs I've currently got in my current free hit draft. I'm about to remind myself in a minute anyway. But I think given how bad Wolves have been, you've got to look at this as a potential opportunity for some very, very differential points. It could blow up. It could just be awful. But yeah, I kind of weirdly quite fancy Van de Ven for a bullet header for some reason, even though he hasn't had a shot on goal in like 8 or 9 game weeks. I've just got it in my mind that he's due one. And Solanke in the mix as a striker who's like, I mean, let's be honest, he's been awful all season as well. But they're playing an even worse side, and they've only had to play Wolves once this season. If they played them every week, they might not be in this mess. So I don't know. It depends how brave you are. I don't even know how brave I am to go with Spurs this week, because there are good picks in all positions, and you could easily just overlook them and not even get punished by overlooking them, even if they did do well, because all of their ownership is going to be like maybe 20-30% combined. But yeah, they're playing an absolutely awful Wolves team. So it's fixture or form, what you back. And if you want to go for something different, then I can see decent reason to go with Spurs. One thing I'll note though, on Porro, he took all corners from both sides under De Zerbi and was playing more centrally, like you said. So I do quite like that as a potential option, because then even if Van de Ven, on my hunch, gets his set piece goal, then maybe Porro's the one who's assisted it. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one to read, this one. You've got to think that if Spurs are ever going to get out of this mess, they need to do it against Wolves. If they don't, they're surely screwed. So
yeah, I mean they're playing a terrible team, but they are a terrible team. But
but crucially not as terrible.
Yeah. But it's one of those things to kind of bear in mind, I guess. On to the penultimate game, Arsenal Newcastle. Surely no Newcastle. Surely not. And I think it's
Bruno G.
Maybe, but not at home. Therefore, I'm not as interested. I mean, I think that double Arsenal defense is probably a given. It's just whether you go kind of more than that. Raya for me is a bit of a passive income pick in goal. You know, I'm not expecting anything, but I'm hoping that he and Gabriel get me a regulation 12 points. And it's whether I add a third. I don't know. Still about the best defense. Chuck a Saliba in. Hincapié should play. Don't know if Calafiore or Timber are around, etc., etc. I'm surprised by a few people having Rice in a free hit. Like, he feels like one I'm really happy to take on. I mean, obviously very steady, but I'm not entirely convinced about backing him. And it could be kind of famous last words on a 1 week kind of ceiling hunting basis. I just don't feel like he's going to be that guy. I feel quite happy to take that one on. It feels a bit like an auto pick. And it's kind of, if you go for a third Arsenal, where do you go? Eze, I did think about. I spoke to Adam Pritchard, who's the Planet FPL Arsenal correspondent, a good friend of mine. He pointed out there's just so many players jostling for minutes in him. Saka, who's definitely going to need minutes ahead of Atleti, Dauman, Madueke, Trossard, Martinelli, and even Jesus, all in the mix around there. He rarely himself gets a full 90. I think that's just too difficult to. It's too difficult to justify including. The proper minutes pick take on Rice is probably Odegaard, actually, back fit. But similarly, buts, and the ceiling does feel quite low. And at 7.8, it does have kind of knock-on impacts, and depending on your spending power. Up front, Gyökeres, Havertz, I just can't guarantee who starts, and as a result, I just can't go there, really. And as such, I just kind of feel like I've defaulted to just stick in the basic two Arsenal in Raya and Gabriel. Newcastle, since the turn of the year, have been very poor defensively, as we've discussed, and offensively not been great, which is obviously fantastic for the Arsenal defence. I don't mind if people want to stack it and go full triple. I think that's absolutely fine. I've got no worries about that at all. I just can't get behind any of the attacking options from Arsenal, Sam. And there's always something which has meant that I'm uncomfortable. I mean, I did think I cracked it with Eze being the shout. Spoke to Adam, and I think that he told me things I kind of already knew, but I didn't want to acknowledge almost, you know? So, yeah it's very, very tricky. And for me, it kind of feels like I'm going to be comfortably uncomfortable with just two of them.
Yeah, I think I've currently got two, and I think it'll be the same two as you. If we knew Timber was fit, then he might sneak in for me. I think that could be a nice differential shout that not many are going to. Yeah, that are not many are going to be thinking about or have in their teams. So I really like him. I'll be keeping an eye on training photos and what Arteta might be saying in press conferences, as we recently discussed how helpful press conferences are. I'm sure he'll give us all the information. Shout out to Pep for telling us about O'Reilly, by the way, last week. We didn't mention that, but actually there are green shoots sometimes. Anyway, I think there will be an Arsenal attacker that pops off this week. I just don't know who it will be. It's going to be so hard to nail down which one it would be, that I don't think it's worth going for any of them. I don't hate Rice as an option because you can guarantee 90 minutes. He's on some set pieces. He might get some DEFCON up against. I think it's the triple of Joelinton, Tonali, and Bruno G back in the fold, I think. So you'd imagine Rice is going to have to do some pretty hard yards to take down that midfield, because they are a pretty mean 3-man midfield to take on any week. So I think he's got a decent chance of hitting DEFCON. The floor's quite high, just not very exciting on a free hit. And I do agree with that, but points are points. And in the current FPL landscape we're in, Rice is a decent floor. So I don't mind it. I currently don't have him, but he's not completely out of my thinking. If Eze was more nailed, I'd be going for him all day long, but I just don't think we can guarantee it. Gyökeres, Havertz, who knows? But yeah, I'm very similar to you. I will back the defense, partly for coverage, but also because they have the best clean sheet odds this week anyway. Gabriel's wallpaper, and then Raya or Timber, or possibly both, and you just go triple and really, really cross your fingers that they keep a clean sheet. But yeah, Timber's one that I'm keeping a very close eye on, just in case, because I think he does come straight back in if he's fit. Because I mean, the players that they've had to put there have not been setting the world alight. So I think Timber is just an absolute lock the second he's fit again.
Cool. All right, and then finally, we'll discuss that more in a minute. Man United Brentford on Monday, no games on Sunday. How sad. Obvious Bruno, Cunha, Bumo, both taken off with slight injury concerns. Casemiro seems to be talk of the town at the moment, and people have realised that he does do a few goals. And then Brentford, I think it's just Thiago, honestly. Thiago, or do you take it on? I mentioned earlier on, I was listening to Cash Correspondence on my home, and I'm kind of in agreement. That's a really tricky game for United. I don't think it's a very high scoring game either. One man, though, Sam, that I think is going to be every single free hit, something that non-free hitters need to be really petrified of. You'd be really worried about this guy, Aiden Heaven. 3.7. It's a rhyme. But I mean, he's just a must for any free hitter as a bench enabler. Like, even if he's your third bench, I mean, there's a chance he's going to play awesome.
Yeah.
Of these two, it's Bruno for me, and then Thiago for me feels a shoe-in. I don't need to take him on. I mean, there's going to be really decent ambient ownership from non-free hitters. I think he's going to be one of those players who non-free hitters will be looking to, thinking free hitters are going to want to differentiate away from that. And I back him in basically any game to go off, because he can. You know, all it's going to take is a couple of clumsy tackles. You know, Slabhead gets his head in the way of KLP or something, and suddenly it's a penalty, and then off you go. But for me in that game, I mean, I don't mind Cunha. I don't mind kind of the anti-narrative of Bumo, but for me, it just feels like Bruno and Thiago. Okay, both quite kind of boring picks, but the two picks that I think are the ones that mostly kind of I vibe with in that game, which is probably a bit dire for the last game of the game week, but at least one will be my captain. And Thiago, I know it's one of those I just don't need to take it on, and I'm hoping other people do overthink.
Yeah. You absolutely don't, and probably shouldn't take on Thiago. I think if you're chasing, it makes a lot more sense to look elsewhere, because there are other good strikers this week, but he's in the golden boot race for Brentford, and he's on penalties. He gets 90 minutes, and we've always said with Brentford, they create big chances for their centre forwards. They just do, week on week on week, season on season. I am really struggling to look past Thiago. There are other good options. I'd love to. I am tempted to take him on, but it just feels like overthinking it somehow. Like, why am I taking on a striker who's in this good form all season long? The minutes are there, the pens are there, and Man United are far from solid defensively. They've got their issues at the back. I think he's in for me at the moment. There are other strikers in my thinking, but yeah, I'm struggling to take him out of my side, to be honest. Partly out of fear, because as well, it's coverage. And I can take on players in different positions. He's just so good. I am interested in maybe doubling up in midfield for Man United, though. So Bruno's in, obviously. If Mbeumo's fit, I quite like that, because, again, no one's really looking there. Like, if you're looking at a second Man United midfielder, most people are going towards Cunha. A few people are going Casemiro, although I will note that Brentford's XGC from set pieces is the second best in the league this season. And that's where Casemiro gets his goals. So he'll probably hit DEFCON, but unless Brentford have a bit of a uncharacteristic off day set piece wise, it's unlikely he'll get a goal. So I'd probably overlook Casemiro for that reason. I quite fancy Mbermo, ex old club factor, maybe coming into it a little bit. But currently it's just Bruno and Thiago, just like you.
Nice. All right. Hold that thought. Let's talk about the outcome of double game week 33. Quite a lot going on in the background. Last minute, Senesi losing an assist due to a very, very marginal offside. I've just seen that. It's an arm, I think.
I put in a call. He was miles off.
Yeah, fair play. Fair. And Leeds equalising right at the very end.
Yeah.
So 2-2 there overall, 1-0 City. Looks like Haaland's just snuck in for free bonus, which we're obviously all loving.
Oh yeah.
And it is 129 for me. Just outside the top 50k. I think so. 1 point. So basically, I've ended up where I was before. No, 2 points out. So basically, where I was at the start of the week has just kind of continued. 129, Sam. That's kind of on. That's pretty good. I'm not upset about that at all. Yeah,
you shouldn't be.
Everything I said earlier on does still stand though. But yeah, it's still good. It's still good. It's just a 40k rise, and take comfortably in the top 100k. And yeah, you're I guess feeling very good about your prospects for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, much better than I was at before this game week. Tonight didn't go particularly well. Obviously, Hill own goal, but he did at least hit DEFCON. No clean sheets from Leeds or Bournemouth, but O'Reilly obviously got his clean sheet, so that's something. Haaland scoring as captain and getting bonus again, that's helpful. But yeah, not probably one of the weaker days on the bench boost for game week 33 for me, but I've ended up at 160k starting the week at 317, so I've halved my rank. Got 133 points, I think. I'm far from complaining. It's a very, very good week, and it's put me in with a hope of getting top 100k. So I think I'm 17, 18 points outside. That's doable. It's not easy, but it's doable. So yeah, game on.
Yeah, and the free hit, I think, is going to be the. I think that's going to. I don't know whether we kind of count it as like a guaranteed green arrow.
No, I don't think you can.
Bench boost this week, I think. Balance probabilities just by the fact that you've got extra appearance. Probably going to do it. With the free hit, I don't know. I think those who don't have a free hit probably were planning for this. So it's kind of fine. And it's just a case of making sure it all works. But yeah, I mean, I think hopefully these kind of couple of chips, the final couple of chips this year, are going to do the job. Really, in terms of just getting us to a good position for the last few weeks. I can straight bat it. You've got to take a couple of calls, but I think it's probably not too bad for anybody thereabouts.
Yeah.
So those free hits. Apologies to those who've not on free hit, but hopefully you can have a look at this or have a listen.
You're going to take a look
and think, am I worried or am I not? Usual caveat: the vibe's absolutely huge. Some of this, I think, actually does choose itself. As a massive disclaimer, have not been on social media. I'm not on social media anymore, really. So I haven't been kind of looking at what people are talking about. Hey, there we go. Right, let's look at the free hits and discuss where we are.
Here we go.
I've got to maximize this so I can see yours, Sam.
Oh yeah, I'll do the same. Won't be able to see the chat for a minute.
Yeah, I think maybe like yeah. I mean, do you want you go first? Let's have a listen.
Yeah. So the big caveat here is, as I said, when we're going through the fixtures, it really comes down to how I end up reading each one going, and I don't feel like I've done all of my necessary research to land on like, this is how this game is going to go, or how I feel it will. And therefore, if one pick changes, 2 or 3 probably change in this draft quite quickly. This is where I'm currently at. It will almost certainly change by the deadline. So double Arsenal defense, Raya and Gabriel in goal and in defense. I do currently have Virgil in a back 3. But I'm very tempted to go for Ismail Assar. The only problem, the reason I actually had him in my draft until the other night, The reason I've taken him out is because he didn't start against West Ham. And I am a little bit worried that he was one of Glasner's men that maybe turned around and said, yeah, just play me in Europe. Don't play me in the Premier League as often as you can. But he's basically had a week off. I think he probably will start. And if he does, I kind of fancy him against Liverpool. And if I fancy him against Liverpool, then I would take out Van Dijk and maximize the upside there. But that would be a big call to make because Van Dijk's well owned and Sarr would be going against the grain quite significantly. But so Van Dijk's in at the moment. I do have Porro in my back line. Again, far from locked. That could end up being Mavropanos. But it's kind of just running out of options that I liked because if I'm going with Gibbs White in midfield, I don't want Sunderland defence. If I'm going with an Everton midfielder, I don't want West Ham defence. Then I'm looking down the sheet and I'm like, well, I don't have a ton of money spare. I can't quite afford Timber and triple up, and that's quite high risk anyway. I'll have a chunk of the Spurs defence and hope that the set pieces for Porro may work out. I don't mind it. He's far from locked. In midfield, I've got 5. Bruno's obvious. Salah's fairly obvious, although not nailed. Then the other 3 are pretty differential, I would say. Gibbs White may be slightly less differential, but he's in great form at the moment. Even aside from the hat-trick, before that, he was still running pretty hot. And he's very much like Nottingham Forest's it guy to get them out of the mire at the moment. So I think he could continue that against a pretty leaky Sunderland defence at the moment. So he's in. Other Morgans are available, such as Rodgers, who I'm also quite interested in that exact position. And I do have enough money in the bank if Mbermo or Cunha are confirmed fit and I fancy them. That could easily be one of those 2 instead. So that one is very much up for grabs. I've gone Gakpo as my second Liverpool midfielder at the moment for shot volume, maybe a bit of centre forward play towards the end of the game when Isak inevitably gets brought off. Quite fancy it, and obviously Slot loves him for whatever reason. I don't think he's the best player in the world, but this isn't about who the best player is; it's who's going to get the most points. Szoboszlai could easily fill that gap instead, and I do like him. He's got a high floor, but he was kind of playing in the pivot in the last match, not at right back where he's picking up DEFCON and not in that like more advanced role either. So he wasn't as involved in the attacking phases. So feels like potentially a chance to go against him and go for someone that almost no one else has got. So Gakpo is in a bit of a differential there with the potential for high upside. And then, okay, I'll quickly say the strikers. Thiago and Bowen, a little bit boring. They could change. It could be Solanke, maybe Watkins, but they're in at the moment. My final one in the 11 is Dewsbury Hall, who I've wanted to own all season. He's cheap. His points per game are genuinely mind-blowing. I think people forget how long he was out for in the middle of the season, and he's just continued to pick up returns ever since coming back. And if I'm backing against, if I don't think West Ham keep a clean sheet, I would like a slice of the Everton attack. And I just really quite like him. I've just got a good gut feeling about him. I think he gets something. He's in good form. West Ham could keep it tight for them, but equally Everton could score a couple. So again, that one comes down to how I end up reading the game. If I feel like West Ham do keep it tight, then it probably ends up being a 4-4-2 and Mavropanos plays instead of Dewsbury Hall. But right now, that's where I'm at. 3-5-2. Few template picks in there, but yeah, there's 3 or 4 rather differential ones that could set me apart. And they're all very much up for changing.
Yeah. Okay. Broadly very similar. So similarities, kind of the players for me, but don't go anywhere. Raya, Gabriel, Virgil, Gibbs White, Salah, Bruno, Thiago, Bowen. So the 7. Is that 7? Yeah. 7 or 8 dudes that don't change. I've got Mavropanos in for your Porro. I'm not comfortable with the Spurs defense, honestly. But I can 100% see why Porro would be of interest. I definitely can. It's just for me, I think I look at it and think you're relying on on attack and return, I think.
I don't
So
mind it for a clean sheet, honestly. Wolves
no,
have been dire recently.
I don't mind it at all. I just don't trust Spurs' defense. Simple as that. But I can get it. I can understand it. If you look at the clean sheet odds, I can completely get behind that. I've got a free. I'm in a 3-4-3. So I've got Mavropanos at the back over Porro, as mentioned. The kind of extra slot for me is that I've got Watkins up front, and I think that's I think that's kind of speaks for itself, really. I put Thiago, Watkins, and Bowen in as my kind of front three at the beginning, and that's not changed at all. And I think that I'm going to just leave it at that. In fact, really, Sam, all that I've really been messing around with is maybe that Mavropanos slot, but mostly kind of midfielder 4, which at the moment is Xavi. You mentioned earlier on that Gibbs White is the it guy for Forest. I think that he's the it guy for Spurs, as mentioned earlier on. But I just can't quite settle on that particular spot. The rest feels I just feel fine with it, which I think is from practice, from wildcarding, from free hitting down the years, and setting up a pre-game week 1 squad. If you feel all right with a couple of days to go, okay, if there's a bit of information, that could probably change the paradigm a little bit. But right now, I feel kind of more than all right with the players that I've got in front of me, except one, effectively, which is that third mid spot. I don't know. I don't mind Gakpo. I don't mind Xavi. Really, actually, the Fulham stat I said earlier on about them being kind of the third worst defense in the turn of the year has made me think Rodgers alongside Watkins. But I don't know. I kind of quite like having a stake in the Spurs game, which sounds ridiculous, but I do have kind of a player in basically every game there. And I do feel like there's going to be some goals in that game. I think it might come. Yeah, I think he's a likely sort of player to be supplying that. I don't mind Gakpo. I don't mind kind of probably Odegaard as narrowly the Arsenal pit, but at 7.8, that's quite expensive, and something the bench becomes a lot weaker. What we've seen recently with kind of a player randomly missing out, I'm a little bit nervous about not having a strong bench. So I've got a bit more, 2.4 million more spending power than you, and I've put a lot of that actually into my bench. So I've got Garner first sub, and I've got Neco Williams second sub, and that kind of, I know that could probably go into making Xavi into Cunha or something like that. But on a 1 week basis, I kind of feel like I kind of want to have that insurance on the bench almost, and in some ways, and I'm kind of happy with the expected points output of Xavi in that particular game against Wolves. Compared to a player like Cunha against Brentford. It could be in Dye there as well. But as I said earlier on, I'm not particularly I don't know. That's the one spot I'm not particularly kind of sure about. But the rest I feel kind of quite settled on. It's not the case that it kind of quite picks itself, but for a lot of the spots, it certainly does. I do kind of feel like the ones that we've both in common picked do feel kind of very difficult to nitpick. It's just there's a couple of areas. I think there's where you were hoping to kind of have nabbed the player who does go off on the week, as it were. And for me, and to some extent for you as well, the aim for us is fine. That's fine. It's got a decent green arrow. I think that's what we're looking for. The harder sort of assignment is for those who are looking to really get a massive green out of this free hit, which is not the same free hit as it has been in the past. We mentioned earlier on about the fact this isn't a guaranteed green arrow.
No,
I feel like if you're looking at free hits and back in the day, just the fact you're on the free hit meant that you had a green arrow because of minutes. At the moment, I think those who are not on free hit probably are well planned. I think they'll be looking at these teams and basically just kind of saying, well, okay, a lot of this is quite logical. Double Arsenal defense, quite logical. I think you probably would have known, or you would have covered, or you probably will have some sort of plan for dealing with that. And Verge at the back, Liverpool and Palace famously have a bit of a tete-a-tete where they're not particularly maybe a bit of a bogey team, shall we say? Look at like Gibbs White, yeah, okay, a bit of exposure there. Like maybe Watkins, probably a bit of an exposure there. But Thiago and Bowen, I think, should be probably mostly well covered. I mean, the players like Xavi, players like Gakpo, those are the sorts of players that free hitters are looking to kind of profit from, but they're not
Salah.
necessarily. Yeah, and Salah as well. I was about to come on to as being like the big one where you look at and be like, okay, he could really hurt me this week, but over the course of the body of work this year, perhaps shouldn't worry you that much. But I suppose he's going to be the one where you'll be looking at him thinking, okay,
one last ride, please. Yeah.
Well, maybe I think it's the second from last ride for me. I think, but yeah,
maybe
one last ride. I don't know, man. The only thing I need to think about now is that kind of fourth mid spot. I think I'm pretty happy with Mavropanos actually as the third defender, and I've narrowed it down to Rodgers because of that Fulham stat or a punt on Xavi, and I'm kind of tempted to punt it and just have extra coverage basically. But yeah, very very similar, and I'm not massively surprised, to be honest, despite that it's the first time looking at it.
Yeah, I will again caveat. Honestly, there are very few positions in my team that are locked. Even some of the ones that you're considering as locked for you, I think at your rank makes sense to be locked. But I'm potentially open to looking past Thiago, Bowen, Van Dijk, Raya. Like, I'm happy to look away from them if I need to. They're in at the moment. I don't want to just shove in 11 differentials for the sake of it. But I think all of them are good picks, but can be taken on genuinely. So, for example, that's why right now I've got Dewsbury Hall rather than a Mavropanos, for instance, because that's how I'm currently reading that game. But it could easily switch before the deadline because Mavropanos is another equally differential pick that could do very, very well. Same with Spurs. We've read it slightly differently. I've currently got Porro. It could end up being a Spurs attacker instead if I don't feel like they're going to keep a clean sheet. And yeah, I've got 2 or 3 other strikers I quite fancy. Solanke, I don't think is a terrible pick. Won't be owned by almost anyone, is being overlooked by almost everyone, even on free hit. So that could be opportunity. Yeah, I think at the start of the pod, I think I said like it's a really exciting week to free hit, and it is because there are so many good options, but very few great options. And I think that basically means things could be a car crash if you pick them wrong and you go for a load of differentials. If you're at like 50k-ish like you are, I would probably maybe even be more boring than you've been, given I'm not as risk-taking as you generally. I'd probably have Rice and Szoboszlai in as my third and fourth mids, to be honest. And maybe Solanke instead of Watkins, and maybe leave it at that, something like that. But that's a non-risk taking draft, and you want to push higher, and I get that. And I think there are at least 3 or 4 positions in my team that need to be at least somewhat differential to give me the chance of pushing up by 30 or 40k. But equally, it could also go against me and I could end up at 200k at the end of this week. So yeah, I think it is an exciting week, but excitement could go both ways. It could be bad, it could be very bad, or it could be very good. But non-free hitters shouldn't be too scared because they've got good picks like Wilson, like Anderson, etc., who a lot of free hitters won't have, but could easily do well. Like, there's no reason why they couldn't score points this week.
Yeah, I don't think, like, on the Szoboszlai and Rice point, I think I'm more than happy to take on Rice. I just don't feel like there's downside protection, but I don't feel like there's enough X risk, as it were, for me to be looking at him and thinking, crap, I really need to be defending against that. As I mentioned earlier, as I mentioned quite a lot of times, that Bournemouth game, I think in game week 19-20 is the one that flies high in people's minds, but mostly is kind of between 3 to 5 points. I feel like that is, I'm not taking on Thiago, but that's one that I will take on because I don't think there's going to be the explosiveness there. I could be very wrong. Maybe we'll see a pair of Rice assists and I look like an idiot, but I don't think that's going to happen. So Szoboszlai, I can easily do that because I am with Neco Williams and Garner as my first and second subs. Does that feel like a free hit purchase? That's the only thing, and maybe that's just a bit of a bias on my behalf, where I just feel like I want to ceiling hunt on this.
Yeah. But
Or
you could just floor hunt. Like you could like in your position, you could. Like you don't need
yeah,
to.
I could, but I feel like I don't feel the ownership's gonna be high enough. Almost, maybe once the free hits from game week 33 dissipate, then their spots like around kind of 30-40%.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something to bear in mind. But again, with him, I mean, it is apart from whether it was Spurs, wasn't it? Where I bought him and he scored the free kick. Other than that, if that kind of one-time event doesn't happen, it's not the floor is high, but the ceiling isn't particularly high. Probably, yeah, it's definitely one to consider. I think it's definitely one to consider for me. I'd almost feel like I want to go with you, kind of there, if I was going to triple up on Liverpool and go with Gakpo, and go for it. I feel like because the rest of the team is quite samey, or at least it's kind of calculated risk and calculated kind of covering of exposure, the two things coming together. I do look at it and think, well, I'm kind of looking at it thinking, well, maybe this is just me in my own little microcosm, that I've kind of got one punt here effectively in Xavi, and that kind of feels all right. But I can completely see why people look at it and just go, yeah, screw Spurs. I'd never go there. I'm going to just get Liverpool, get a spot slide, and just be done with it. But I just don't think that Palace games are going to be a gimme. As we said right at the top, Sam, these games are really difficult to call. A lot of them,
All of them. Yeah.
And I'm kind of happy to have a finger in each of the pies, effectively.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to go after the highest upside picks for sure. And take on the high ownership that I think is like overexposed, or over indexed. So my current forward line, Bowen and Thiago, are two picks that are very much not locked for that reason, that they will be high ownership. But could you see Everton keeping a clean sheet against West Ham? Yeah, absolutely. That could happen. That Everton are a good defense, they're a good team, and Bowen isn't a prolific goal scorer. Thiago maybe slightly less so because he's just been phenomenal all year. But there are just every fixture, like even Arsenal, Newcastle, it could go the other way. It really, really could. So this is one of those weeks where it's fun to be on a free hit, because I think it takes you back to the good old days where data wasn't such a factor, and you can just read the matches and try and predict how they're going to go and pick your team based on how you read those matches going. And I think that's a quite fun way to play. It's obviously a risky way to play, but because they're all so tight, they're difficult to read. I think we just kind of have to. That's just a necessity this week. So yeah, I'd be disappointed if there weren't a few quite rogue-looking free hit drafts out there in the community this week, because I think there's the opportunity to chase. It won't work for everyone, but some people will cash in on it.
Agreed. All right, I've just seen what time it is and how long we've been going on for, Sam. So I think we should probably leave it there.
Oops.
But yes, interesting stuff. Quite a lot covered today, I think. Essentially talking to ourselves for a little bit while the games are going on, but hopefully a decent preview for the free hit week, or if you're not free hitting, a week where you need to. I don't think you need to be that scared, to be honest. Not at all.
No. Non-free hitters are pretty well set up generally as well. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see which strategy pays dividends this week as well, because every week it changes. But fingers crossed for another green arrow. That would be quite nice as we approach the end of the season. Anyway, as we reach the end of today's pod, thank you all so much for listening and for watching. We have been Who Got the Assist on Blue Sky. You can find us at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. I'm FPL Pricey on there. I'm also FPL Pricey on X, where we can find WGTA at WGTA_FPL. On YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist, again written out all one word, and I'm FPL Pricey on there as well. And if you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a follow on those social channels. Give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a like, hit subscribe, especially if you're new around here. And thanks again, everyone, for watching.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everybody. I hope we just look forward to blank game week 34. WGCA will be back next Tuesday as usual. Definitely Sam. Maybe me. We're getting very, very close to the time now. I will probably be back. We'll see. I might be around. I think it's kind of like the week after. I pretty much almost definitely be around. The week after that, I won't be around. There's no way at all on God's green earth. There's no way I'll be around. The baby will be out. If it's not me, Tom Campbell can hopefully step in. We shall see. Either way, WGCA. We'll see you next Tuesday, or maybe it will be Monday because Sam mentioned that at the end he's got tickets to the massive Saints versus Ipswich game on Tuesday night. So it probably will be Monday next week.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist?